girl vanished from her room in 1989. 11 years later, mom activates her wind-up music box. It was early September 2000 when Margaret Holloway finally opened the old box she'd kept buried under clothes in the back of her closet. It had been sealed shut for over a decade, duct-taped hastily the night everything changed, the night her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, vanished from her room without a trace. The box still smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. Inside it, wrapped in a faded towel with cartoon strawberries, was Lily's favorite possession, a porcelain wind-up music box shaped like a white carousel. It had little gold horses and chipped pink accents. For years, Margaret couldn't bear to touch it. She'd convinced herself the sound would break her. But that morning, something compelled her. A strange stillness in the house, the way the sun hit the curtains, a dream she couldn't fully recall but left her shaken. She turned the key at the bottom of the carousel. It played the same tinkly tune Lily used to fall asleep to. But on the fourth rotation, Margaret froze. She thought she heard something layered beneath the melody. A second sound, faint, wavering, like a voice. A girl's voice. And it was saying her name. Back in 1989, the Holloways were just another middle-class family in a quiet, mostly forgotten part of upstate New York. Margaret was a school librarian. Her husband, Dennis, worked at a paper mill. They lived in a modest 2-story house on a curved cul-de-sac in Woodbrook, a town that didn't even show up on some maps unless you zoomed all the way in. Lily was their only child. Bright, imaginative, and shy. She had a habit of talking to her toys and writing notes to people who might visit later, which she tucked under her pillow or inside drawers. Sometimes she'd fold them into tiny paper boats and float them in the sink. On the night of September 3, 1989, everything seemed normal. Margaret read Lily a bedtime story, The Little Engine That Could, and tucked her in around 8:30 p.m. Dennis was downstairs watching a rerun of Cheers. Lily kissed her mom goodnight, wound up the music box, and asked the same question she always did. "Will you check on me later?" Margaret promised she would, but when she came back around 10:15 p.m. to peek in on her daughter, the room was empty. No open window, no sign of struggle, no sounds, just the music box, still spinning, still playing. The police responded within 20 minutes. The house was searched top to bottom. Dogs were brought in, neighbors questioned, roadblocks set up on both ends of the town. No one had seen anything. There were no footprints outside, no fingerprints on the doorknobs. Lily's shoes were by her bed. Her favorite blanket was folded neatly on her desk chair. The only thing missing, aside from Lily, was a single page torn from her diary. A week later, the FBI got involved. Posters went up, tips came in, mostly dead ends. One woman in Albany claimed she saw a girl matching Lily's description in a laundromat, but the footage showed it was someone else. Another man in Syracuse said he recognized her from a dream. Police didn't even follow up on that one. The search lasted for months. Dennis Holloway fell apart, quit his job, spent his days driving aimlessly along back roads, knocking on doors of farmhouses, asking if anyone had seen a little girl in strawberry pajamas. By March of 1990, the case had gone cold. Back in 2000, Margaret sat in her kitchen with the music box on the table, still stunned by what she thought she heard. She wound it again, slower this time. Closed her eyes, and there it was again, just before the tune looped back. "Mom, I'm here." The voice was almost buried in the chimes. Soft, echoey, like it was underwater. Margaret didn't sleep that night. Instead, she dug up every recording of Lily she could find, old VHS tapes, birthday parties, that Christmas morning when she unwrapped a bicycle. She played them side by side with the music box. The voice matched, not just a similar voice. Lily's voice. She took the music box to an audio technician in Kingston, a guy named Reed she found through a coworker's nephew. He was skeptical at first, assuming it was just a mother's grief. But when he listened to the recording through filtered headphones, he frowned. "This isn't in the music," he said. This sounds inserted." Margaret told him the box had never been opened since Lily disappeared. Reed didn't have a response. But 2 days later, he called her back. "I did a spectral analysis," he said. "And there's something weird. Look, I don't know how to explain this, but the voice, it has depth. Like a real recording, not just an audio hallucination or ambient bleed. He paused, and the reverb doesn't match the room where the box is now. It's like it was recorded, in a different space. A space like what? Margaret asked. I don't know, he replied. But wherever it is, it's not quiet. That same week, Margaret received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It showed a wooded clearing. In the foreground, a rusted swing set, half collapsed. And on one of the swings, blurry but unmistakable, was a girl with long brown hair and strawberry pajamas. There was no note. Margaret took the photo to the police. They sent it to forensics. But there were no usable fingerprints, no metadata, nothing to trace the origin. The image was real, not digitally altered. But that was all they could say. They didn't reopen the case. So Margaret went alone. Margaret left for the clearing the following weekend. It took her 2 days to figure out where it was. She used the trees in the background, tall white pines with distinct bark patterns, and cross-referenced the swing set with archived park registries. Eventually, she found an old recreation map of a long-defunct summer camp called Camp Maplewood, abandoned in 1982 after a string of maintenance issues. It was 27 miles north of Woodbrook, tucked into a forest near the Ashcroft River. She packed a flashlight, gloves, and a copy of the Polaroid. She didn't tell anyone she was going. Dennis had moved to Florida by then, remarried, and never wanted to speak about Lily again. The drive was longer than expected. The roads were half-paved, many covered in dead leaves and early fall frost. By the time she reached the gate, if it could be called that, the sun had already dipped behind the hills. Camp Maplewood was a ruin. Nature had reclaimed most of it. Cabins sagged under collapsed roofs. The dining hall was overgrown with moss and saplings. A rusted canoe lay split in two by a fallen oak. But the swing set was still there. Exactly as in the photo. Same angle, same broken chain on the left side. And the same strange emptiness in the air, like the world had paused to watch. Margaret approached slowly. Leaves crunched under her feet. The swing swayed once, then stopped. No wind. She knelt beside the middle swing and noticed something small lodged in the dirt, a plastic bead. Purple. The kind that came in those children's bracelet kits. Lily had a set just like it. She pocketed it and turned to leave, but then heard the carousel music. Just a single note, faint, echoing across the clearing. She froze. Listened again. Nothing. Margaret returned home shaken. She barely slept. That night, she placed the music box beside her bed, wound it once, and waited. This time, the voice was clearer. 3 words. Come find me. In early October 2000, Margaret contacted a woman named Clara Jules, a retired professor of folklore and oral history at SUNY Albany, who'd once published a paper titled Children Who Vanish Without Doors. Recurring themes in upstate disappearances. Clara was skeptical at first, but intrigued. She invited Margaret to her house and listened patiently as she told the entire story. When Margaret showed her the music box and Polaroid, Clara grew quiet. She disappeared into another room, then returned with a binder full of clipped newspaper articles and hand-typed letters. She laid them out across the table. There were at least 8 similar cases, all within a 70-mile radius, between 1949 and 1993. All girls, all between the ages of 6 and 9. All vanished from their homes, in some cases with windows locked from the inside. And in every case, a single object remained behind, seemingly untouched: a doll, a snow globe, a jewelry box. And in 2 cases, a music box. Clara flipped to one article in particular: Mount Hope girl, age 8, vanishes from locked house, 1974. The photo showed a brown-haired girl. Her face was rounder than Lily's, but her eyes, the shape was nearly identical. Even the expression, cautious, soft. Margaret felt like she was looking at a younger version of her daughter. Clara tapped the margin of the article. Someone had handwritten a note. Music box left spinning. Melody identical. Margaret whispered, "Where do they go?" Clara hesitated. "I don't know," she said. "But I don't think it's far." Around Halloween, Margaret received a second envelope. Again, no return address. Inside was a cassette tape. No label. She didn't own a player anymore. Had to borrow one from the school library where she still worked part-time. She played the tape after hours in the AV room. It hissed, crackled, then came the music box tune. But warped, slower, like it was being played through waterlogged speakers. Then, a sound, breathing, followed by a faint thump. Then another. And then, a whisper. "Mom, the carousel is broken?" The voice trembled, like it was coming from somewhere far away, struggling to reach the microphone. Margaret dropped the player. She drove home, pulled the music box from the closet again, and turned it over. For the first time, she noticed a hairline crack on the underside, barely visible, running beneath the winding key. When she pried it open with a flat screwdriver, a thin strip of curled, yellowed paper fell out. On it, in tiny, neat handwriting, "Don't let it stop." She stared at the words until the room swam. The box had been playing for nearly 30 seconds. She reached to rewind it, but her hand froze. Because the music had stopped, and the room was not silent. She heard footsteps. Upstairs. Margaret stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. The footsteps above her were slow, deliberate, as if someone, or something, was pacing the hallway outside Lily's room. But the house had been locked. No one else was supposed to be there. She reached for the phone with a trembling hand, but the line was dead. She hadn't even noticed before, the hum of the dial tone wasn't there. The footsteps stopped, then, a creak, as if someone had just sat on a bed. But Lily's bed hadn't been touched in 11 years. Margaret climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in one hand, the music box in the other. The house was dark, save for the dim amber glow from the hallway nightlight, the same one Lily used to insist stayed on all night. The door to Lily's room was ajar. Margaret pushed it open. No one was there, but the covers were turned down, not in the way Margaret had left them all these years. Neatly folded and untouched, but slightly rumpled, the way they'd look if someone had just risen from them. She approached the bed, and there, on the pillow, was a second bead, this one pink. Just like the ones in Lily's bracelet kit. Identical to the purple one she'd found at Camp Maplewood. Margaret sat down, suddenly dizzy. That night, she dreamt of water. The next morning, she called Clara. Clara listened without interrupting, then told Margaret something she hadn't shared before. "There's a man," Clara said. "Used to work for the town. Groundskeeper. Quiet. Lived alone. Name was Harmon Griggs." She paused. "He kept maps." Clara explained that Griggs had worked at Camp Maplewood in the 70s and later volunteered with the Woodbrook Historical Society in the late 80s, just before Lily disappeared. "He believed places kept echoes," Clara said. "Not in a spiritual way. He called them resonance patterns. Said some spots, don't forget." Margaret wrote the name down. Found a listing. Drove out to the edge of Oswego County, a small house that looked abandoned. But when she knocked, a voice answered. Harmon Griggs was in his 80s. Frail, stooped, but lucid. He invited her in with a look that suggested he'd been waiting for her. The walls of his home were covered in maps. Not just topographic ones, strange, hand-marked grids with dates, coordinates, and cryptic notes like "Hummed here 1976. Doll returned, 1981. Wind again, December, 89. Griggs shuffled to a cabinet and pulled out a worn folder labeled CH, Camp Holloway. Not Maplewood. It showed a cluster of 3 buildings, one of which was marked, Rec Cabin B. But the surrounding land, according to Griggs, had been layered with history, built over trails and older homesteads. What happened to them? Margaret asked. The girls? Griggs didn't answer right away. Instead, he traced a thin finger across the map. "I think they walked through the wrong memory," he said. Then he looked at her. "You ever wind a clock backward?" Margaret left Griggs' house with more questions than answers. That night, she returned home and examined the music box again. She flipped it over and turned the key slowly, not forward, but counterclockwise. The music didn't play. Instead, there was a series of faint clicks, mechanical, deliberate. And then, a sudden pop. A hidden compartment slid open beneath the carousel platform. Inside was a third bead, blue this time, and a folded slip of paper. Much smaller than the last. It read, "She remembers more when it rains." Margaret stared out the window. Clear skies. She waited. Rain didn't come until 3 days later. It started softly, around 2 a.m. By 2:30, the music box had started playing on its own. Margaret woke to it, and this time, the voice was stronger. "Lily?" she whispered. The melody slowed unnaturally. The air felt thicker, as if the room had gained weight. "Don't follow them," the voice said. "They're not real." Then static. Then silence. Margaret sat in the dark, soaked in sweat, trying to breathe. The next morning, she found her living room window open, the latch fully turned, even though she never opened that side. And on the sill, a photo. One that had never existed before. It showed Lily, clearly, standing at the edge of a dock. Water behind her. The trees around were wrong for their town, taller, more northern. But the photo had one unmistakable detail. Lily was holding the music box. And behind her, in the reflection of the lake water, was the silhouette of a second girl. Margaret stared at the photo until her fingers went numb. It was real, glossy, heavy Kodak paper. No signs of digital tampering. The date printed in red along the white border read, August 1997. 8 years after Lily had vanished. She'd be 15 in that photo, but the girl looked no older than 7. Exactly as she had in 1989. Margaret took the photo back to Clara. They studied it under magnification, using a loupe and a backlight. The reflection in the water showed not just Lily and the second girl, but something stranger behind them. Shapes that resembled trees but curved slightly inward, like they were leaning or folding toward the girls. And above, where the sky should have been, the reflection was black. Clara tapped the reflection. "This doesn't make sense. If it's water, it should reflect light. Even shadows have color." Margaret whispered, "It's not water." They scanned the photo again. This time, Clara ran it under UV light. Faint handwriting bloomed in the white border. "North Trail, 3rd Gate, red thread." It was written in the same neat, tiny script as the previous notes. Margaret didn't know what it meant, but someone clearly wanted her to follow it. The next weekend, she returned to Camp Maplewood. The clouds were heavy again, like the weather was holding its breath. She followed what little trail remained behind the old cabins, pushing past brush and tall grass until she found a narrow footpath, almost hidden. She counted as she walked. 1 wooden gate, 2, then, the 3rd, barely intact, with a red thread tied to the middle slat. Her heart thudded in her chest. She stepped through, and the forest changed, not immediately, but gradually, like waking into someone else's memory. The air smelled different. The sound of insects fell away. The wind grew warmer, even though the clouds hadn't moved. After 20 yards, she saw it. A small wooden structure, like a shed or hunting blind, tucked between 2 trees. Vines had overtaken its roof, but the door was intact. It creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, dust, old crates, a broken lantern. And on the far wall, dozens of beads strung across nails in delicate lines. Some purple, some pink, some blue. Margaret stepped forward, her legs unsteady. She reached out and touched one of the beads. It snapped off easily, felt warm, almost sticky. There was something scratched into the wood behind them. Names. Dozens of them. All girls. And there, halfway down the second row, was Lily Holloway. Next to it, a tiny mark, like a tally. 1. Margaret stumbled back, heart racing. Something moved behind her. A flicker at the corner of her vision. She spun around, but no one was there. Only the wind through the leaves, though it sounded just slightly too rhythmic. Like someone breathing. She ran. Back home, she laid out the beads she'd taken, 3 in total now, and placed them in a line beside the music box. That night, she heard the carousel spinning before she even touched it. The tune began slowly, warped and bent, then steadied. And again, the voice. But this time, it wasn't just Lily. There were 2 voices, one whispering, one humming. The whisper was urgent, frantic, like it was trying to give instructions. But Margaret couldn't make out the words. The humming, soft, slow, repeating the melody of the music box, was unmistakably a child's voice. She rewound it, over and over, until finally, one phrase came through clearly. "Don't open the 4th. Margaret returned to Clara with everything: the beads, the new recording, the photo, the name wall. Clara was pale when she finished listening. She pointed to the phrase, "Don't open the fourth." "I think it means a fourth object," she said. "A fourth door? Gate? Or maybe another box?" Margaret had never mentioned another box. But that night, while searching Lily's things again, she found something she had forgotten. A smaller carousel, not musical, just a toy, made of plastic. Lily used to pretend it talked to her stuffed animals. Margaret opened the lid. Inside was a fourth bead. Black. It pulsed with a strange sheen, almost oily. As soon as she touched it, the music box across the room began to spin on its own. But it didn't play music. It clicked, like a countdown. Margaret threw the bead across the room. The music stopped, and her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. No voice. Just a low hum, almost electronic. Then, faintly, a child. "Why did you stop it?" The line went dead. The next day, Margaret found her front door ajar. No sign of forced entry. Nothing stolen. Except one thing. The carousel toy. The plastic one. Gone. And in its place, on the living room floor, was a fifth bead. Clear. Inside it, suspended like an insect in amber, was a tiny photograph. Lily, again. This time standing in front of a dark wooden door. Unmarked. No frame. Just shadow behind it. She wasn't smiling. Her hand was on the doorknob. Margaret kept the fifth bead locked in a drawer. She didn't want to touch it again. But every night, she heard the music box. Even when it was closed. Even when she locked it in the garage. It would start to spin, always around 3:17 a.m. The exact minute Lily had been marked missing on the original police report. Margaret began writing things down. Timestamps, phrases from the recordings, changes in the beads. She realized something. Every time she interacted with one of the beads, touched it, opened something tied to it, something else changed. A new photograph, a new voice, a new memory. She wasn't just hearing her daughter anymore. She was communicating with something. But was it really Lily? Clara and Margaret returned to Griggs one last time. The old man's health had worsened, his hands trembled, and he had trouble focusing. But when they laid the beads out on his kitchen table, his eyes sharpened. He pointed to the black one and whispered, "You should have left it sealed." Margaret asked what the beads meant. Griggs told them about something he called memory anchors. "They're not toys," he said. "Not really. Children touch them the most. Sleep next to them. Cry on them. Laugh into them. They don't record what happens, they hold on to it." Clara asked, "And the music box?" Griggs just nodded. "Some things don't just hold echoes. They send them back." Then he looked at Margaret. "Was Lily left-handed?" She blinked. "Yes." Griggs nodded. "They always are." The phrase stuck with her. They always are. She went back to Clara's archive. Found the photos and case notes of all 8 girls. Every one of them, in school photos, birthday shots, class art displays, held crayons, forks, toys, with their left hands. Margaret felt sick. She wasn't religious, but that night, she placed her hands on the music box and whispered, "Please, just show me where you are." And the carousel spun. Not once, not twice, but 11 full revolutions. Then it stopped. The top clicked open. Inside was a 6th bead. Dark red. And folded beneath it, another slip of paper. This one different, finer, almost silky. It read, "You're close, but she isn't alone." That weekend, Margaret drove out to a storage unit she'd kept for years, filled with Lily's old toys, clothes, school projects. She went through every box. Halfway through, she found something strange, a drawing. Lily had made hundreds over the years, but this one was dated just 3 days before she vanished. It showed 2 girls, one clearly Lily, the other, similar, but wrong. Her face was scribbled over with black marker. Her hair drawn in angry, jagged lines. The paper around her figure was torn, as if Lily had tried to rip her out. At the bottom, written in red crayon, "She wants what I have." And on the back, in faint pencil, "If she knocks, don't open." Margaret sat in her car for nearly an hour after that, thinking, remembering. The month before Lily vanished, she had started talking to an invisible friend. Said she came from the hallway. That she only knocked at night. That she whispered stories through the closet. At the time, Margaret thought it was imagination. Now, she wasn't sure. That night, she waited. Set up a camera in Lily's old room. A small motion-triggered camcorder. She placed the music box in the center of the bed, wound it once, and left the room. She watched from the hallway. At 3:17, the music began. And in the static fuzz of the old black and white screen, something moved. Just for a moment. In the top left corner, a shape. Small, like a child, crouching by the bed. Margaret rushed in, but the room was empty. Only the music played, but it no longer sounded like a carousel. It sounded like whispering, layered voices, shifting in and out of pitch. And on the pillow, another bead. This one silver, almost translucent, barely visible. And beneath it, a familiar object. Lily's diary. The same one the police had kept in evidence. Except this one had entries dated after 1989. The most recent one, October 2, 1997, she left the door open again. I saw Mom, but she didn't see me. Margaret dropped the book. That date, it was the night Margaret dreamed of water. The night she thought she felt Lily in the room. The night the music box played without her touching it. Margaret sat cross-legged on the floor, diary open in her lap, reading the entry over and over again until the words blurred into each other. She left the door open again. I saw Mom, but she didn't see me. That line clung to her like damp air. She didn't know what door Lily meant. Not the closet, not the front door, something else, somewhere between then and now. Margaret turned the pages carefully. The paper felt wrong, too thin in places, as if it had been soaked and dried again. Ink ran in jagged streams, some words smeared. But the writing was unmistakably Lily's. The loops in the L's, the backwards lowercase g's. She remembered helping her fix them when she first learned cursive. The entries skipped weeks, sometimes months. It's cold again. I sleep under the tree now. She doesn't follow me there. Someone else knocked, not her. A man. I didn't answer. He said he was from before. But I don't remember before. Then one page folded in half, taped at the corner with a star sticker, the kind Lily used for her reward chart. Margaret peeled it open slowly. Inside, the music helps, but only if I hide the black bead. And below it, in tiny script, the other girl doesn't like when I write. Margaret closed the book gently. She felt suddenly very cold. The following morning, she drove out to a craft store and bought a new wooden box. Plain, unmarked. She lined it with velvet, placed the black bead inside, and sealed it shut with a small brass lock. Then she buried it behind the house. Not deep, just under the maple tree by the fence. That night, for the first time in weeks, the music box didn't spin. Silence. For the first time in a long time, Margaret slept. She woke to a noise. Not the music. A knock. 3 soft taps. From inside the closet. The door was closed, the same way it had been for years, sealed with a magnetic childproof lock she'd never removed. She got out of bed, heart thudding, and walked slowly toward it. Her hand hovered over the handle. Another knock. Then, "Mommy?" So faint she almost doubted it. Then again, "Mommy, it's cold." Margaret pressed her ear to the wood. There was no breath, no rustling, just the faintest hum of the music box, distant, like it was beneath the floorboards or behind a wall. She didn't open it, not that night. The next morning, she returned to the tree. The earth was disturbed. The box was gone. In its place, someone had left a different object. A pair of shoes. Tiny, faded pink canvas, worn soles, frayed laces. Lily's. Margaret recognized the scuff mark on the toe where she'd dragged her foot under the swing set, and the spot where she'd once drawn a little heart with permanent marker. Inside one shoe, another folded note. "We don't want her bead." She clutched the shoes to her chest and cried on the lawn for what felt like an hour. Then she went inside and turned on every light in the house. Over the next few days, nothing happened. No knocks, no music, no dreams. Margaret dared to believe, just for a moment, that it was over. That maybe sealing the bead had broken whatever cycle she had stumbled into. She went back to work part-time. Shelved books, talked to the janitor, watered her plants. But then, one evening, as she was sorting through Lily's old drawings again, she noticed a picture she hadn't seen before. It had been tucked into the back of a folder labeled Kindergarten Stars. A crayon landscape, dark blue sky, a crooked house, and two figures standing outside. One was a girl with brown hair. The other was taller, thin, drawn entirely in black, and around both of them, dozens of white circles. When she looked closer, she saw they weren't just circles. They were beads, dozens of them, floating like stars. And underneath the drawing, in shaky writing, "This is where she collects." Margaret put the drawing down and suddenly realized something she had missed all this time. The beads were not just markers. They were breadcrumbs, and something, was following them back. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen with the drawing on the table, the shoes beside it, and the music box, unopened, in the center. She didn't wind it. She didn't have to. At 3:17 a.m., it started turning anyway. But it didn't play music. Instead, the carousel turned in complete silence. No chimes, no melody. Margaret leaned closer. A faint grinding noise, mechanical, repetitive. Then, a single sound. Knock. Not from the box. From the hallway. She stood up, moved slowly toward the door, careful not to step on the creaky floorboard near the pantry. The knock came again. 3 short raps, not loud, but deliberate. She turned the corner. Nothing. No one at the door. No one at the windows. She flicked the hallway light off and on, just to break the moment. To tell herself she still controlled something. But when the light came back on, there was a note taped to the wall. Small, torn from a notepad, folded once. She took it down with shaking fingers and opened it. Inside, "Your memory is the lock. Hers is the key." Margaret returned to Griggs that morning, unannounced. The front door was open. She stepped inside, calling out. No answer. The smell hit her first. Must, iron, something dry and wrong. She moved cautiously through the house. Maps still covering the walls. The kettle was on the stove, cold. A cup of tea, half finished, sat on the table. And near the back door, crumpled on the floor, Harmon Griggs. Still, pale, gone. In his hand, a photograph. Margaret knelt down and gently pried it from his fingers. It was Lily, but not from the old Polaroids. Not a school picture. She was older, maybe 12, her hair longer, but the same brown waves. Her face leaner, but still her. She stood in a wooded clearing. Behind her, a shape, a stone arch or gate, barely visible through the trees. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it. And her face, it wasn't sad. It was scared. The police ruled it natural causes. Said he'd had a weak heart for years. Margaret didn't argue, but when they bagged his effects, she asked quietly for the photo. They didn't notice. She slipped it into her coat. That night, she called Clara. "I think I saw where she is," Margaret said. "Where?" "There's a place in the photo." She said, "A gate, or a wall." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Clara said, "You need to go there. But not now, not alone." The next day, Margaret pulled out a box of Lily's things she hadn't touched in years. She found something odd, a small, heart-shaped locket. She didn't remember it. Inside, instead of a photo, was a folded paper square, folded tight like origami. She opened it carefully. More handwriting. "Mom, she's copying. Don't trust the next me." Margaret sat very still. That night, she didn't sleep. She set the music box in Lily's old room. Lit a candle. Brought every bead she had, purple, pink, blue, red, silver, and the clear one with the photo sealed inside. She laid them in a line around the box. And waited. At 3:17, the box spun. The melody began. But something was different. The room grew cold, not just cooler, but cold enough to see her breath. The candle flickered violently, then steadied. And for the first time, the carousel didn't complete its loop. It stopped, abruptly, and the music slowed into static. Then a voice, but not Lily, lower, imitating. "Mommy?" Margaret whispered. "Where is she?" The voice paused. Then, "She's almost out. You shouldn't have buried it." The room snapped dark. Candle out. Carousel still. When she turned the lights back on, everything was in its place, except one thing. The black bead, gone. And in its place, the locket. But now with something else inside. A photo. Margaret, sleeping. Taken from the hallway, the angle unmistakable. Taken the night before. Margaret didn't call the police. What would she say? That someone had broken into her house and left a 20-year-old picture of her sleeping, inside a child's locket? That her dead daughter was communicating through beads, toys, and photographs that shouldn't exist? No, they'd take the items, mark them as evidence, and she'd never see them again. So she did the only thing she could. She sealed the doors, covered the music box with a sheet, taped the closet shut again. And then she drove to Clara. Clara opened the door before Margaret even knocked. She looked pale. "There's more," Clara said quietly, leading her into the back room. She spread out a new stack of case files on the table. Older than before, yellowed paper, clippings from defunct local papers. More missing girls, some from as early as 1921. Different names, different towns, but one recurring detail, a reference to a mirror girl or the one that comes after. In one 1938 letter from a parent to a local priest. "She looks like my daughter. She sounds like her, but she isn't her. I know. I see it in the eyes." Another note from 1955. "I buried the bead, but she came anyway," and scrawled in pencil in the margin of a 1972 report. "Left-handed, all of them." Clara looked up. "They're not being taken," she said softly. "They're being mirrored," Margaret whispered. "Copied." Clara nodded. "And the real ones?" Margaret asked, not sure she wanted the answer. Clara didn't speak for a moment. Then finally, "They're caught. Somewhere between." That night, Margaret returned home with her thoughts buzzing like insects. She placed the music box back in the closet and closed the door, this time without sealing it. She left the beads on the windowsill. And she waited. But this time, she didn't sit by the door. She went into Lily's room and sat on the bed. At 3:17, the room stayed quiet. No music, no knock. Then she noticed something strange. The shadows were wrong. The moonlight fell across the carpet, but didn't touch the floor under the bed. It bent slightly upward, like there was a seam in the air. A fold. Margaret got on her hands and knees. Nothing there, but she reached out, and her fingers disappeared, not visually. They were still there, but the sensation vanished. Like her hand had slipped into ice water or airless space. She jerked back. The music box spun once, a single chime. And then the closet creaked open on its own. Inside, on the floor, was a new photo. Lily and Margaret, together, in the clearing from the old picture. But Margaret had never been there. Not in her memory. Not yet. The next morning, Clara called. She sounded shaken. "There's one more name," she said. "From the list?" "No. Older. From before the missing girls. Someone who studied the same places. Same symbols. Same beads." She paused. "His name was Emil Holloway." Margaret's heart skipped. "That's my grandfather," she said. "I never met him. He died before I was born." Clara whispered. "I don't think he died where they said he did." Margaret dug through her mother's old belongings. Shoeboxes, photo albums, scrapbooks. And finally, she found it, tucked into a thin green binder labeled Family Notes. A letter, faded, handwritten, dated June 1962. From Emil Holloway. "I've seen it now. The mirror. It opens, but not for us, for them. The bead wasn't just a key. It was a lens. And once you see through it, they see you." There was a drawing at the bottom. A girl, brown hair, standing beside a carousel. And behind her, the shadow of another. A little taller, arms too long, no face. That night, Margaret returned to the clearing behind Camp Maplewood. She followed the trail through the third gate, past the red thread, down the slope where the vines grew sideways, even though gravity said they shouldn't. The woods were silent, no insects, no birds, only her breath. She found the swing set again. But this time, there was something new beside it. A doorway, not a house door. A freestanding frame of wood, half rotten, standing in the dirt without walls. Just the frame. Behind it, nothing but trees. But looking through it, something shimmered. Slightly, like heat on pavement, or the beginning of a memory she didn't know she had. Margaret stepped toward it, Her hand shook. She reached out and touched the wood. And for a second, just a second, she heard Lily laugh. Margaret didn't step through the frame. She couldn't. Something in her spine locked, not fear, exactly, but a kind of recognition. Like part of her already knew what was on the other side, and it wasn't ready to face it. Instead, she crouched, traced the edge of the wooden threshold with her fingers. There were carvings in the wood, faint, worn down by weather and time. Not symbols, names. She found Lily's first, then another name, older, carved deeper. Elsie Holloway. She didn't recognize it, not until she went home that night and pulled out the oldest family records she could find, birth certificates, census scans, funeral cards pressed between pages. Elsie Holloway was Margaret's great-aunt. She vanished in 1921. At age 7, the newspaper headline read, "Local girl gone missing after dream reports, family blames ghost stories." Margaret stared at the date. The same year as the first bead case Clara found. This didn't start with Lily. This started with them. That night, Margaret had the first clear dream in weeks. She was in a forest, but the trees were impossibly tall, like cathedral pillars. Their bark glistened, the air buzzed. In front of her, a carousel stood alone in a clearing, half buried in moss. And on it, turning slowly, a dozen girls. Some she recognized from the photos Clara had shown her. Some she didn't. None of them looked at her. They turned and turned, eyes vacant, lips parted just slightly as if humming, though no sound came. And then, at the far edge of the clearing, she saw her. Lily, sitting beneath a tree, knees pulled to her chest, music box in her lap. She looked up at Margaret, spoke one word, "Wait," then the dream ended. When Margaret woke up, the music box was gone. She searched the house top to bottom. Every drawer, every closet, every cabinet. Gone. And in its place, in the center of her kitchen table, the clear bead, cracked, and inside it, something new. A sliver of film, still image, developed in light. It showed Margaret, but not in her house. She was in the clearing, in front of the carousel, holding Lily's hand, but her own face was blank, as if something had been erased, or hadn't yet been drawn. Margaret called Clara, told her everything. Clara was silent for a long time. Then finally, "There's one more place," she said. "The oldest record, before Maplewood, before Woodbrook." She gave her an address. An abandoned church near the Vermont border. Burned down in 1946. But the foundation remained. And according to Clara, beneath it, a cellar. That's where the first bead was ever found. Margaret drove there the next day. Took the photo. The beads. The diary. Everything. The church ruins were harder to reach than she expected. Hidden behind a curtain of trees, long overtaken by vines and the slow collapse of decades. But the stone steps leading down still existed. And when she reached the bottom, she found the cellar door, rusted, chained, but weak with time. She pried it open. Inside, dry stone walls. Candle stubs. Old furniture turned to dust. And in the far corner, beneath a tarp, a carousel. Not porcelain, iron, much older. It was small, barely waist high, with painted wooden horses, all cracked and headless. And carved into the base, the word "replace." She touched it. The room went silent, and then she heard it. Lily, whispering, not from the box. From behind her, "Don't stay." Margaret turned around slowly. Nothing there, just darkness. But in the silence, she heard something else. Breathing. She backed out of the cellar, stumbling into daylight. Once outside, she found her car door slightly ajar. Inside, the music box. Returned, but the top was broken off. The mechanism exposed. And wedged inside, where the spring should have been, a strip of paper. One sentence, written in Lily's handwriting. She made one more. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat with the music box on her lap, watching it, as if it might move again. The top was broken. The spring exposed. The delicate gold-painted horses were chipped. One had snapped clean off and rattled inside the carousel's hollow body. The last note she'd found, she made one more. Sat beside her. She didn't know if Lily had written it or something that knew how Lily wrote. That was the terrifying part now. She was no longer sure who was leaving her these messages. Or what. She gathered the remaining beads, 6 total. The seventh, the black one, had never reappeared. She placed them on the table in a circle. Then she added the photo of her and Lily in the clearing. Still frame, still silent, still not real, and beneath that, the locket with her own photo inside, taken while she slept. The circle was complete, and the house grew quiet. Too quiet. Margaret didn't realize she'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table. But sometime near dawn, she woke to the sound of something clattering. Not loud, but constant, plastic tapping tile. She looked up. All 6 beads were rolling in slow circles on the tabletop, even though the surface was flat. Like something was stirring them from underneath. She reached to stop them, but the moment she touched the clear bead, she saw something. Not with her eyes, but in her head. A hallway. Long. Wooden. No windows. The floorboards warped like they were breathing. And at the end, a door. Painted dark red. The same one from the photo Lily had drawn. The one where she wrote, "Don't open." But in the vision, the door was already open. Inside, she saw, not Lily, herself, holding Lily's hand, smiling. But it wasn't her. The thing wore her face, but the mouth didn't move right. And Lily looked straight past her, through the vision, into Margaret's real eyes. Then she whispered, "Not that one." Margaret jolted back. The beads had stopped moving. But the locket had cracked open. And inside, the photo was gone. In its place, a torn piece of wallpaper. She didn't understand, until she flipped it over and saw the floral print. She knew that pattern. It was from Lily's room. But not now, not 1989. It was the wallpaper before they remodeled, in 1984, when they'd first moved in. Lily was just a toddler then. That pattern had been stripped from the walls, repainted over. No one had seen it in 16 years. Margaret stood slowly and walked upstairs. She entered Lily's room and began feeling along the baseboard. Behind the old bookcase, hidden between the wall and the floorboard, her fingers found a small tear in the plaster. She pulled. Underneath, like it had waited, was a square patch of the original wallpaper, faded but unmistakable. And written on it in ink, 732. She tried the code on everything she could think of. Safe boxes, file cabinets, combination padlocks. Nothing fit, until she remembered something from the cellar, the rusted iron carousel with the word "replace" carved into it. 3 horses had been missing. 7 remained. 3 tall, 2 broken. She returned there the next morning. The cellar was darker than before. Felt heavier, as if the air had absorbed something since her last visit. She knelt beside the carousel, fingers trembling, and began to turn the platform manually. 7 horses. 3 tall, 2 broken. She stopped at the 5th one, cracked at the base, and pulled. The horse came loose. Underneath, in a hollow socket, a key. Wrapped in a red thread. She took it. Back home, she didn't know what to unlock. Until she remembered something her grandfather had written in the letter Clara found. The bead wasn't just a key. It was a lens. She returned to the closet. Opened it. Nothing. Then she took the clear bead, the one that had held the photograph, and held it to her eye like a magnifier. And the wall changed, not physically, but in depth, as if what she saw through the bead was slightly misaligned. Lines didn't match up, corners bent, a shadow appeared in a place that should have had none. She touched the wall, and felt a gap, a seam. She pressed harder, and a section of the wall popped inward with a soft click. A compartment opened. Inside, a velvet-lined recess. And in it, a second music box. Identical in design, but black. She didn't wind it, not yet. She stared at it, heart hammering. She took the key from the iron carousel and gently inserted it into the side. It fit, clicked once. Then the box slowly began to turn on its own. The melody was the same, but slower, deeper, bent downward in pitch. The kind of song that sounds backwards even when it's not. She closed her eyes, and Lily's voice whispered directly into her ear. "It's not a door." Margaret froze. Then, "It's a mirror." The box stopped. The room returned to silence. Margaret opened her eyes, and standing across from her, on the far side of the room, just behind the half-open door, was a figure. Her height, her build, her hair, staring. She moved closer, but the figure moved too. Synchronized, her reflection, but not in glass, not in metal, just there, standing. Margaret raised her hand. The reflection did too, but then it smiled, just a beat too late. And Margaret knew. That wasn't her. Margaret didn't move. Neither did the reflection. It just stood there. Same eyes, same jaw, same tilt of the head. But there was something wrong with the hands. The fingers, they were just a little too long. Not grotesquely so. Just a detail you wouldn't notice at first. Margaret whispered, "Where's my daughter?" The reflection tilted its head the opposite way. The wrong way. Then it spoke, in her voice. "You raised her to remember. I only need her to forget." Then it blinked, and vanished. Not into smoke, not into darkness. Just gone, as though it had never been there. And the music box spun once more. This time, in reverse. Margaret didn't speak to anyone for days. She didn't eat much. She walked the house with a flashlight even in the day, stopping at corners, staring into vents, pressing her ear against the closet, the walls, the floor. She wasn't afraid. She was listening. And then, one night, it came back. The knock. 3 soft taps. Not from the closet. Not from the hallway. From inside the wall. Just behind Lily's old dresser. She moved it aside. Pressed her palm flat. Nothing. But the wallpaper, the newer wallpaper, the one from 1989, had a thin seam running down the middle. She pulled it back. There was no secret door. Just something scratched into the dry wall beneath. A circle. 7 beads drawn around it. And in the center, a word. Still, she didn't understand it, until she noticed the quiet. Complete. No wind, no heater hum, not even her breath. She was holding it, unaware. And then, the music. Soft. Familiar. But not from a box. From behind the wall. Lily's lullaby. Margaret didn't sleep that night. Instead, she returned to the clearing. This time, she brought everything. All the beads, both music boxes, the photographs, the diary, and the carousel horse key. She arranged them in a circle around her. The trees were silent, the air was still, and when she wound the black music box, it didn't play. Instead, the trees began to shift. Just barely, like the forest itself was adjusting to her presence. A shimmer appeared in the center of the clearing. It looked like a heat wave, then like a reflection, then like a doorway, not one you could step through, but one you looked through. And inside it, Lily, sitting under a tree, the real one. Margaret knew it, not just by the face, but by the way she held the music box. Not like a toy, like a memory. Their eyes met. Lily didn't smile. She only mouthed one word. Wait. Margaret stayed there until dawn. Then the shimmer faded, and she was alone. The next day, she gave Clara the beads. Every single one. She said, "Someone else is going to hear them. Just make sure they know what they're hearing." Then she packed up Lily's room. Not to throw it away, but to keep it safe. She placed the diary in a lockbox, along with the carousel horse key and the original Polaroid. She buried the black music box again, this time with salt, tape, a sealed bag, and a note. The note said, "Do not open, ever." Then she boarded up the closet and sealed the cracks with resin. Not out of fear, but out of respect, because some memories aren't ghosts. They're mirrors, and if you leave them alone long enough, they look back. Margaret still lives in Woodbrook. Quiet life. No visitors. No interviews. Sometimes, the neighbors see her walking the edge of the woods behind the old trail, where the trees grow too straight, and the wind doesn't whistle the same way. She never stays long, just stands, listening, in case the wind carries her daughter's name. Because some echoes don't fade. Some stay, and spin, forever.